This is the New Alliance Talk. Empowering municipalities with private capital for sustainable urban development. Please welcome to the stage Biswas Baral from the Kathmandu Post.
Hello, everyone. So this will be the last session of the Hamburg Sustainability Conference. And it's on the need for cities in the world over the need to mobilize private capital, because the public capital is not enough to meet all the sustainable development needs of the cities. And there are huge shortfall in capital. And coming from Nepal and the city of Kathmandu, Kathmandu itself faces big challenges in terms of waste management, management of refugees, and various other problems. So this will be a session on the management of private capital for the sustainable development of tomorrow's cities, carbon neutral cities. To kick off this session, I'd like to invite Niels Annen, the designated State Secretary of the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany.
It almost feels like home here at this podium for me, I guess. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear Executive Director of UN Habitat, Anacláudia, dear President of Cities Alliance, Mrs. Espinosa, dear Vice President of EBRD, and ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues and partners, I hope that these past days in Hamburg have been exciting and enriching for you, as they have been for us. And we have left a crucial final topic for what I would say the final push, financing urban development. And it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this important session on empowering municipalities with private capital for sustainable urban development. I see this topic not only as a timely, but as a critical topic as we seek to build a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient cities in a world facing constrained public budgets and escalating urban demands and needs. And I don't know if you had an opportunity to walk a little bit around the city. Of course, you know, I'm not a neutral observer. I'm a citizen of Hamburg. And of course, you see a beautiful city, but I think it's very important to connect that debate to the global north, because in principle, we have the same challenges with regard to financing, to prioritizing if budgets are tight. As cities continue to grow and to sprawl, the need for adequate infrastructure too is increasing. Infrastructure in the traditional way for housing, but also for now digital connectivity, for energy, water, and sanitation. And this is only mentioning a few. These infrastructures are not luxuries. They serve as the basis of social inclusion, economic opportunity, and climate resilience. In fact, they present the backbone of the social development goals. The World Bank, ladies and gentlemen, estimates that low and middle income countries require an annual investment up to 821 billion US dollars to meet their urban infrastructure needs. And I'm sure that you agree that's indeed a colossal number. Public budgets, I think that has been very clear here during our discussion. Public budgets alone will not be able to bear this weight. So the private sector has both the capital and has the expertise to be a key partner here, even if the flow of private capital currently remains far below potential. So we have to ask ourselves, why is that? Yes, projects are often small. Regulatory frameworks are frequently unclear. Risk-sharing mechanisms are time and again inadequate. Support remains fragmented. And cities often lack the capacity to structure investment-ready projects. For this reason, I am exceptionally pleased that in this session we will launch a joint statement on strengthening municipality access to private capital. This statement, so far endorsed by the World Bank, the European Investment Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Luxembourg, Switzerland, UN Habitat, Cities Alliance, and Germany, demonstrates our firm dedication to promoting sustainable urban infrastructure and enhancing municipalities' financing options, particularly by mobilizing, de-risking, and blending private capital. For banks and our financing partners, the task is clear. We want to align our offers and to improve coordination with cities and the private sector. In short, we want to become better catalysts, not just funders, but regulatory enablers, risk mitigators, if you will, and what we did here today and yesterday, conveners. Our esteemed panelists will shed more light on this during the panel discussion, and I am very excited to hear their reflections. Germany, dear friends, is committed to supporting urban climate finance through various initiatives. One of our flagship initiatives is the City Climate Finance Gap Fund. We are very delighted that this fund is a collaborative effort between the World Bank and the European Investment Bank, with operational support from our implementary agencies, GIZ. Our second noteworthy initiative is Civic, a platform comprised of the city's finance facility and convenient of mayors in sub-Saharan Africa. Together with our partners and signatories of the joint statement, we are deeply committed to further strengthen the urban climate finance agenda. We are dedicated to make use of upcoming events to invite further interested parties to join this collective mission. At the FFD4 in Seville in a couple of weeks, couple of days, UN Habitat will promote the issue. And in Brazil, and we just discussed with the ambassador at COP30, the COP of the cities, we want to present and discuss our joint approach. So let us lay the foundation today for us to better align our joint efforts tomorrow, so that we facilitate channeling more capital into infrastructure that communities so urgently need. Thank you very much.
Now I would like to introduce the three panelists for this discussion. Ming Zhang, who is the Global Director, Urban Resilience and Land Global Development, World Bank. María Espinosa, former President of the UN General Assembly, President of Cities Alliance. And Claire Coustar, Global Head of ESG and Sustainable Finance and Vice Chair of the Board of Directors for Deutsche Bank, Turkey. All right. So Ming, let me start with you. You have just come out with a very comprehensive report on the state of the cities and their infrastructure needs and how to develop them in a carbon neutral and sustainable way. So can you tell us about the main challenges and opportunities for mobilizing private finance to boost urban development, and what the significant findings were during your research?
Thanks a lot, Biswas, and good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity. Very happy to join this important dialogue on unlocking private investment in cities. As you know, cities are engines of growth and development, and they generate most of the world's economic outputs and the private jobs. But cities also account for a major and a growing share of global emissions. And they concentrate people, infrastructure, and economic activities that are increasingly vulnerable to climate risks. So that's why I'm pleased, as it was mentioned, to announce that today we are launching a new World Bank report. It's called Banking on Cities. Actually, there's a real report, but also it's online. The report presents the most comprehensive assessment to date of investment needs for resilient and low-carbon urban development in low and middle-income countries through 2050. The cost estimates are quite significant. The annual costs are between 256 billion and 821 billion US dollars every year, which is equivalent to 0.8 to 2.6% of these countries' combined GDPs. So the needs are very high, but they are not out of reach, especially when we realize that these investments are not additional to the city's core investment needs. They are actually core investments in sectors like mobility, waste management, and flood protection. So for the report, how it addresses how should these investments be paid for? And the report highlights three focal areas: funding, finance, and efficiency. The first is funding, which refers to the revenue streams or savings that ultimately cover the cost of investments, such as user fees, local taxes, intergovernmental transfers, development charges, or energy or operation savings. That's the funding. The second part is financing. That's about mobilizing the upfront capital needed to deliver these investments. And the right financing solution depends on the reliability and the structure of the funding sources. So funding is the base, then you can mobilize financing. And the third part, which is also very important, we emphasize in this report, is efficiency. That's the opportunity to reduce costs through compact spatial growth, through better targeted investments and alignment of incentives. So while the public funds are the largest source of urban investment, the report highlights that greater financing flows are needed from the government, international financial institutions, and the private sector. But the private sector is a very important source of financing. So that's just to highlight some of the major results, and I'm very happy to participate in this session and look to concrete ways the World Bank can work with other partners to boost the role of private sector.
Yeah, thank you, Ming. Ming just highlighted the funding and financing needs of cities around the world. How do you meet that challenges? Because what we see right now is that, especially in low and middle income countries, the private sector is not so interested in funding such initiatives. So how would you address that?
To me?
Yeah, no, Maria. Yeah.
To Maria. Oh, it was
yeah,
me?
I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. Because if you say that you're not as interested in bringing, private financing to cities, so that's why I turned to you. But
I'll take and hopefully address that after you.
If the question is to me, I'll answer. And first of all, congratulations to the World Bank for this Banking on Cities report. I think it's extremely telling because of the numbers that you're putting forward. Basically, you're saying that cities in low and middle income countries need between 256 and 821 billion dollars a year in funding for low carbon infrastructure. And that's a big amount. But as we know, it's a win-win investment. And why? Because cities are where action happens in all fronts, for the good and for the bad, but that's where action happens. Most of the sustainable development goals are implemented on the ground in urban settings. When you look at poverty and extreme poverty, that's exactly where it's located. When you look at 70% of the emissions, they are produced in cities. When the demographics where the majority of people are living today and are going to live in the future is in cities, in terms of job, of access to new technologies, but also solutions. That's where cities come to play. And yet what we see is that there is a chronicle limited fiscal space for cities to borrow and to receive investment, and also a very limited capacity, because of the way governance is set, but also because of the way risk is defined. And we hear we need bankable projects, we need, to de-risk investment, and all of this is true. But there is a responsibility, a shared responsibility of scaling up capacity of cities, to produce bankable projects. There is a responsibility not only to increase capacity, but to improve the governance and see how is that cities take part, actively engage and participate and have a political say, when countries discuss and prioritize investment. The same goes for multilateral banks. I think that the World Bank has gone a long way, but we still need, to change the working modalities and the mechanisms of multilateral banks to access the funding. And basically, there are structural drivers and limits, including related to debt. And that's an issue that is really hurting low and middle income countries, and fiscal space and policy space for countries to take the right decisions. Basically, what are the challenges that we see again? As I said, too few bankable projects, or so-called bankable projects, because of lack of technical capacity, especially in mid-sized cities and low and middle income countries, sometimes limiting national legislations and national regulations that limit the access of local governments to finance and investment. And third, in most cases, when we assess risk and we look at bankable projects, the urban poor are left behind. So from the Cities Alliance perspective, we really believe that ownership and that urban poverty should be tackled and put at the center. We know that 1 billion people live in slums now, and unfortunately, this number is going to double in 30 years from now, which is around the corner. So we have, I think, a huge responsibility to close the investment gap, and of course, we need to properly equip cities, create the legal frameworks that are enabling, but also make the governance choices and reforms that are needed. But again, if we do not invest in cities, I don't think that we can achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We can combat poverty. We can decarbonize our economies and reach levels of adaptations and resilience that are needed at the times we live in today.
Yes. Thank you so much, Maria. So, Claire Coustar, you are a representative of a bank, right? Even in previous session, we heard a lot of skepticism about private investment in this kind of projects. What has your experience been in investing in various projects at the subnational level? Can you share some of your experiences?
Yeah, so maybe I can walk through kind of 3 examples, and I'll break them out in terms of type of financing and the borrowers we deal with. So one is financing for cities directly where the city itself is the borrower. And I'll give one example here where we provided a loan to the city of Barranquilla, which is a Colombian city, as a loan that ultimately was used for a number of purposes, but interesting in the context that some of the money we deployed was actually used for coastal defenses, so the build out of mangrove for coastal defenses for the city. And that is financing we felt was very successful. I'd say for cities, I mean, aside from the points that were raised around kind of fiscal headroom, some of the things we find is a lot of cities actually aren't able to borrow. They don't have the authority to raise financing in their own name. And then a number of cities also don't have credit ratings. So, one of the kind of key helpful pillars for us and as banks, but also for institutional investors is a very quick assessment of the credit quality of the city. And not many cities actually have credit ratings. That being said, some of the large cities do and have raised borrowing. So City of Johannesburg has a rating. They've actually raised a green bond financing to finance dual fuel use buses, City of Istanbul as well. So there are examples, but I think, the key impediment we see is this fiscal headroom, inability or not authority to borrow. And credit ratings. I think other types of subnational financings that we've been involved in is for what we call state-owned enterprises. So, for example, we did a very large financing last year to Eskom. Eskom is the utility in South Africa. Critical in terms of delivering electricity to cities and just generally to the country. We financed them for grid upgrade to ensure that there was, maintenance of the grid network and avoid the load shifting, which causes blackout. The key, I would say, impediment or challenge that we see with bankability at the state-owned entity level, utilities, but other state enterprises, that not all of them have the balance sheet actually to support financing. So going back to the funding point that was made is, if you're going to be able to raise non-recourse to the government financing at your balance sheet, you need to make sure you have the revenue sources that can support that. So whether it's, fees from electricity connections or whatever other revenue model you have. And then the third one, and I think really the holy grail for cities, is financing on a PPP basis. So off balance sheet, where there's true private sector involvement, not just at the lending side, but also at the development side. I'm going to give an example of financing we did for Turkey. It's close to my heart because I'm vice chair of our Turkey sub. Very large financing, 5 billion total, where all the lenders were private sector, and it was for the build out of at the time it was the third largest suspension bridge connecting Istanbul and a road to Izmir. And there, from a financing perspective, the credit analysis is very complex because you have to look at the construction risk. How strong is your EPC contractor? Do you get protected if the road and bridge don't get built? But then also, what is the revenue model once the bridge and the road are operational? So there we had to look at toll traffic studies. We had a sort of revenue stack model where we had the local traffic authority provided a liquidity bridge if the tolls were below the traffic study. And then ultimately we had a debt assumption agreement, which has actually been used by the Turkish government in a number of big mega projects, where we could look to the government through the Turkish treasury as the ultimate backstop if a number of things failed. And I think this is where, when we say bankable model, it really comes down to that. And when we look at what we do in developed markets, it's no different. We do lots of financings for cities, municipalities on a PPP project, and it really comes down to the business model. So affordable housing, your rental or mortgage payments from the tenants that live in the house, but ultimately, if that's not enough, then what is the recourse back to the city or ultimately the government?
Yes, thank you, Claire. Coming back to Ming, and I'd request all our panelists to keep their responses short because we have to pack in a few things. So what about the World Bank? She gave the perspective of Deutsche Bank, right? What about the World Bank? What are the kind of interventions it is doing to help cities around the world raise private capital for their investment needs?
Yeah. So the World Bank support probably 3 broad categories. One's on the demand side, and then the regulatory framework and the supply side. So on the demand side, it's basically strengthen the capability of cities in terms of improve their financial capability and technical capability. So we have a methodology to how to do on-source revenue improvement, how to improve the intergovernmental fiscal transfer so local governments have more predictable resources that they can use to tap the capital market. Some of the things, we have this city creditworthiness initiative as a technical assistance to have trained the cities to improve their creditworthiness and how to have follow-up actions on the improve their creditworthiness. Also, for example, as the Secretary Annen mentioned, working with the German government, Luxembourg government, we have this city climate finance gap fund, which we work together with the European Investment Bank, help cities to develop projects, bankable projects that are technical sort of side. So that's on the demand side. And then on the regulatory framework, so help the government to support the regulatory framework to allow prudential borrowing from the cities to tap into the capital market. And finally, on the supply side, we use the World Bank Group. So you have the sovereign guarantee from the IBRD or IDA side. IFC can lend to the cities without a sovereign guarantee. MICA doing the guarantee to de-risk the financing. So that's just from the sort of World Bank Group side. But also we work with other MDBs. There's a MDB's cities working group that meet regularly, try to see how we can sort of work together to support cities more effectively. I think these are just some of the things, but I think there are a lot more that we can do. I'm very glad that in this conference there's a joint statement with BMZ, with IFIs, with Cities Alliance, UN Habitat. We all sort of together to see what more we can do to elevate this agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Ming Zhang. What about how does the Cities Alliance see this debate? Are we missing something? Are some things not being discussed? Well, what is Cities Alliance view on this need for private capital to meet the investment needs of cities?
Well, basically, we draw on the numbers that have come out of the report of the World Bank, and the investment and financing gap for low-carbon infrastructure in cities, especially in low- and middle-income countries, is huge. So how is that we're going to mobilize the resources? And I think at all levels, but of course, private investment is absolutely needed. And as you know, the Cities Alliance works very much in spaces, in urban spaces where the urban poor are in slums. And what we would say is, first of all, increase capacity, empowering cities so they are able to connect with the demands and the requirements of private investment, but also multilateral investment. Second, the importance of social and environmental inclusion of the gains in the investment designs. I think it's extremely important, and also ensuring that large-scale investment really reach the people that are most in need and the urban poor. The slogan of the Cities Alliance is "Cities without slums." So we have to work towards that, and I was very pleased to listen to the World Bank to say it's not only the World Bank Group in terms of guarantees and de-risking and bringing IDA in, but it's also working together with multilateral banks, including, as I understand, regional banks, to create an enabling environment to close the gap. So I think, to fix the governance, to increase the capacity, to empower cities, to give a voice to the ones in need, especially the urban poor, I think it's much needed. And again, investing in cities, investing in the urban poor, I think it's a must if we want to achieve the sustainable development goals, if we want to combat poverty, if we want to decarbonize our economies and meet the commitments within the Paris Agreement. So I would end by saying that we see that cities, again, I started saying, is where action happens. I'm totally convinced it's where action happens, where the potential of solutions lie, but also the places where the global challenges manifest more vividly. And I think that we have a responsibility. I really celebrate and commend the idea of this joint statement that shows that we need to strengthen partnerships, to work together, the private, the public, the multilaterals, the local governments together, all levels of governance, all sectors coming together to basically eradicate urban poverty.
Yeah, thank you. One last question for Claire Coustar. So do you see the potential, for instance, easing the regulatory environment, or what could it be to further unlock the potential of private banks or private capital, for private capital to flow more easily into public infrastructure?
God, how much time do we have? Look, I think regulatory and policy facilitators is a really important aspect. I think openness to also, like I mentioned in the case of the Turkey example, openness to be that kind of backstop if all else fails in the project cash flow models, right? That's super important for bankability. But a stable regulatory environment is key for private sector capital. So I'd say that. I think in addition to some of the points, I think we're leveraging our position as lenders to do more in terms of embedding sustainability, especially at the procurement phase with some of our PPP construction companies, and then working really actively with the World Bank Group and other multilaterals to look at, how can we partner together and leverage on the MDBs and local development banks for parts of the capital structure we might not be comfortable with?
Yeah, thank you so much. So we have a couple of interventions from the floor. First, I would like to ask Jake Leo Kawawaki, Director General of Asian Development Bank, to please say what you have to.
Thank you very much. I'm not mic'd up, so I'll use this. So we were asked a question of, how does ADB go about supporting this agenda? I mean, same thing that World Bank does, but since we have everything under one shop, we have the policy dialogue and the advisory and making bankable projects all under one roof. Therefore, we've discovered that in helping the cities and in helping the countries develop their enabling environment, that we have the downstream issues that's been raised by banks and contractors and PPP counterparts go directly into the policy dialogue. So I think we need a lot more of that to be able to make the market for municipal financing of projects. And just one more thing, if I can, we have the Urban Challenge Fund in India, which is going to be a great experiment on what can be done with government commitment. I mean, they're willing to give 25% of the project as long as 50% of the project is financed by the private sector. I mean, how can we bring everyone together to meet the enormous challenges that we face in the urban infrastructure sector? And if I may, just last thing is that we really need planning. Okay. Municipalities, we need to have plans. Because banks tell us that, is this a one-off project that we're going to do in this one city? Or is there another one? Because they're not willing to come in if it's just a one-off. If they don't have the full plan, the full physical framework to be developed with the future planning for the rating methodology and so forth, even if they have the backstop, I feel a lot of the banks are not willing to full force come in, and of course the project sponsors can't come in without the bank.
Yeah, thank you so much. The next intervention is Mark Bowman here. Okay, we have Mark Bowman, who is the Vice President of European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. If you could address, like, how is EBRD supporting cities in scaling up sustainable investments, and where do you see opportunities for improved collaboration among partners?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the question. And I'm just completely agree with everything that's been said on the panel. And you know, cities are very much at the front line of the climate crisis, affected most, and this is where the solution lies. So this action in cities is absolutely critical. At the EBRD, our main instrument is our flagship Green Cities program. We're very proud of this program. It's been running for 10 years now. It covers 60 cities across 25 countries, more than 100 projects, and over 3 billion euros of investments. The key component of our Green Cities, key components of our Green City program. So first of all, it combines investments with strategic planning. So we will agree an investment and we will work with a municipality on a Green City action plan, which sets out the key challenges, how to manage the city in a sustainable way, but also sets out the key investment requirements. Secondly, I mean, we are a private sector focused MDB, but we have quite a lot of flexibility in our financing models, so we can lend to a government, we can lend to a municipal authority, we can lend to a utility company, or we can lend to the private sector. And we can also work with donors to help combine that with, adequate levels of grant finance or concessional finance. Thirdly, we have a very strong focus on capacity building, technical assistance, policy dialogue, for example, working on the issues of pricing or on how, the critical issue of how to generate a revenue stream to make a project successful. On your question of partnerships, I mean, obviously partnerships is absolutely key to all of this, and the relationship with the municipal authorities is absolutely key. I think we're very proud that through this network of 60 cities, actually the extent to which they can all learn off each other is really, really, really important. We're very pleased to be developing our links with the Cities Alliance, with UN Habitat, and of course we are a very active member of the MDB cities group, and I should say that we're very pleased to be able to sign this statement together, and think that's a good step forward.
Yes, thank you so much, Mark Bowman. And I would also like to thank all three of our panelists for taking part: Ming Zhang, María Espinosa, and Clara Coustar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So with this, I'd like to invite Anacláudia Rossbach, Executive Director of the UN Habitat, to give her closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies. It was very insightful panel. I took many notes. But basically, I believe we are all aware that the pace and dynamics of the urbanization process is bringing cities more and more to a central stage. So what happens in city, what will happen in cities, will have a strong influence in how we are going to be able to tackle the climate challenges, but also achieve the SDGs. Cities have strong infrastructure gaps right now, especially if we look at cities in the global south. And we have to recognize that we are living currently a global housing crisis. So if I look at the numbers, Ming, and your report brought key information to us. We're talking about almost 3 billion people without access to adequate housing. We're talking about more than 2 billion without access to clean water, more than 1 billion living in informal settlements, 300 million homelessness, and hundreds of millions of houses being destroyed by climate disasters, by crises, and so on. So this is a major crisis that we are facing, and it will require a strong, as mentioned in the report, a strong and robust investments. If we zoom into Africa and Asia, we will have almost 2 billion people coming in cities, right? And looking at Africa, where UN Habitat is based, our headquarters in Nairobi, the gaps of infrastructure are very large. So we have cities that have half of the population living in situation of informality, 70, even 80% of the population. So it's critical that we pay strong attention in cities as we discuss the reforms in the international financial architecture. Increasing the international financial flows to and through cities to fund social and physical infrastructure is critical. But the same is also valid in terms of increasing and maximizing domestic resources. And we spoke about today about revenue streams to city, and this is critical. And I do believe there is still room for us to do that, to do both. No, not talking about the major challenge that we have in terms of that, in terms of concessional funding, but using the resources that we are already there, we believe that there's still a room to expand our portfolio and the investments in cities and also internally. Of course, the participation of the private sector is key, but of course, returns and risks, they need to be balanced. And you spoke correctly, you know, planning and continuity and sustainability is critical. The private sector will come in if the risks and returns are there, well managed, and if there is a perspective of going beyond one project, right? And this is, I believe, where we enter into the picture, UN Habitat, and looking at our new strategic plan, where we are really focusing on access to housing, land, basic services, transformation of informal settlements. But we look at urban planning and finance as one part of one single mean of implementation, understanding that cities that are better planned, they will be able to attract more resources, being public, being private, domestic or international. Cities that are better planned, they will also be able to leverage more, minimize the costs, but also leverage more resources. So this is one critical aspect of the future of the work of the UN Habitat. In this sense, we have been active at the discussions, as the State Secretary mentioned, discussions of finance for development. We have been working with countries such as China, Germany, Mexico, Brazil, Kenya, Egypt, among others, and the World Bank actively, and developing the narrative for increasing the financial flows to fund the infrastructure gaps that we have and the future needs of cities. Also, we have been working on the ground, working with cities and working with member states in order to look at these two sides. One, as Ming was mentioning, the supply side, but also the demand side. So one critical aspect that we never discuss is what to finance. What is it that we have to finance, right? And this is part of working on this enabling environment, making sure that the subject of funding is subject to the proper regulations, laws, and there is a social agreement for that. We are working with cities in terms of increasing the revenues. There is a large opportunity in terms of land-based finance. Let's start with property taxes, but we can also talk about a densification bonus and other ways. We can engage, and we are engaging with the private sector. We mentioned housing PPPs and urban PPPs. They are very complex. They embed very high social and environmental risks, for example, and this is an area where UN Habitat can tap into that. And also, of course, the city's utilities. We are working closely together with the IFIs, expecting to sign soon an MOU with the Asian Development Bank, but also the African Bank, and closely with the World Bank. We believe that we can connect our presence on the ground, our convening power, and our expertise to work on the enabling environment and promote sustainability and continuity to the investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So like I said, this is the concluding session of Hamburg Sustainability Conference. So Niels Annen will be taking to the stage one more time this year to address us. But before that, I'd like to ask, I have the honor to invite all endorsers of the joint statement, Strengthening Municipal Access to Private Capital, who are present here today to join us on the stage for a family photo. So Anacláudia Rossbach for UN Habitat, María Fernanda Espinosa for the Cities Alliance, Mark Bowman for European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, F. Cleo Kawawaki for the Asian Development Bank, Ming Zhang for the World Bank Group, Niels Annen for the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And we are also proud to have further endorsers who might not be with us today: the European Investment Bank, the Ministry of the Environment, Climate and Diversity of Luxembourg, and the State Secretary for Economic Affairs, SECO, Confederation of Switzerland, and the French Development Agency, AFT. Thank you. Now I would like to ask Niels Annen to address the conference for one last time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I'm looking if I find everybody I wanted to address, but I will see. Well, we did it. This is the conclusion of the second Hamburg Sustainability Conference. And thank you. Thank you very much. I really have to say that this is quite, we don't tend to be very emotional here in the far north of Germany, but it is kind of a touching moment. Because when we engaged in that journey, and I should be maybe more precise, when our initiators engaged in that journey, there was a lot of heavy lifting to do, convincing everybody that it makes sense to add another conference to an already tight conference calendar, right? To talk with everybody who was needed to make that happen. And I do think that everybody who participated in the first Hamburg Sustainability Conference, including me, was a little bit surprised how well it went. And that was very encouraging, I think, for our initiators, but I do think also for everybody who participated. Maybe some of those who participated needed some, convincing arguments. Calls, letters, very high-level engagement, but we put together a very unique conference. And of course, the second year is always another challenge. And I think all of you know that we did not quite plan for anticipated election, and we did not quite plan for, you know, a new government just having taken office and still being in the face of working everything that needs to be worked on. But I think, thanks to you, to your participation, not only your presence here, but your participation, this conference really has now been, in a way, established. And we delivered, I think, not only in providing spaces for important discussions, encouraging discussions, open and frank discussions, but encouraging discussions with a clear message to everybody who tries to destruct the international multilateral system that so many generations have been working on, but also delivered in the sense that, I don't want to name everything here, but that we really made progress. We had important signings. I think we shaped debates here. So I don't see everybody present that I wanted to ask to come to the stage, but please give a great applause to our initiators, Michael Otto and his foundation. I like to thank everybody who has been working on that in the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. I don't see my predecessor, Jochen Flassbart, here, but he also deserves a big round of applause, as he was also one of the initiators. And I have to mention, not because I'm a citizen of Hamburg, but I really have to mention, I don't know if Liv Assmann is here with her entire team, but I wanted to thank Liv. I wanted to mention you and your fantastic team. The teams have been working like one team. I see Dirk Meyer over there, everybody at BMZ, the City of Hamburg, the Michael Otto Foundation, and of course, I want to thank those who are not always visible. That includes everybody who provided for security, including the Hamburg police and our security personnel, everybody who made sure that none of you have been attending any session hungry. And those of us who have been cleaning up and providing this magnificent space, thanks to the Handelskammer Hamburg, as well as the Senate and the Parliament of Hamburg, for providing us with this magnificent space. I think it's part of, which is already unique, I would even say trademark of the Hamburg Sustainability Conference. So thank you for everybody who made that possible. And although I don't see everybody here also from the HSC GmbH, maybe everybody who has been working on that can join me on stage, so we take a kind of Liv, maybe you and your team, everybody from HSC. And I hope that we will reach our initiators with the last big round of applause. See you all next year in Hamburg, and thank you so very much for making that happen.
Ja. Bitte. Vielen Dank für die Worte.
Vielen Dank. Thank you.
You forgot to mention the UN.
Oh, my God. Ja.
Michael Otto ist schon, glaube ich, schon weg.
Mir da? Okay. 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 Yeah. Okay. Good. You there? Okay. Hello. Yeah. That's right. Thank you. Thank you.
Super, vielen Dank.